Yes, I'm not only worried about the voting machines, but I'm also worried about more and more states are making voting more restrictive with voter ID. And basically the Republican strategy is to, if you're marginal, if they think you might be voting Democratic, is to push you into a different category where they suspend your ballot, where they don't count it, they hold it, including this picture ID national system. So that it's a well thought out strategy on their part to suppress the vote.
Thank you. I am concerned about the security of our elections. I was counsel to the Secretary of State when I was Assistant Attorney General, and I know a lot about election law in the state. I am concerned about the security of our elections. The issue of biggest concern now that the state has moved to paper ballots is that the machines that are used to count the paper ballots are made by the same company that made the electronic voting machines, which were susceptible to errors and often in favor of the Republican Party. In any case, I certainly want to say also that David Iglesias here in Albuquerque deserves a lot of respect for refusing to bow to pressure from Karl Rove, I imagine, and we know from Heather Wilson to bring criminal charges of voting fraud, baseless criminal charges of voting fraud against Democrats in advance of the previous election. He didn't see any evidence of voting fraud on behalf of the Democrats. He stood up to the powers and he said, no, I'm not going to bring baseless charges. And as we know, they fired him. So that's certainly admirable. I am concerned about the security of voting. I'm concerned about the machines that count the paper ballots. Now that we've gone to paper ballots, I think we should have people counting the ballots rather than doing them by machine to make sure, because that's the very first chapter in the election code. I'm sorry, the very first chapter in all of New Mexico law is the election code. It's the most important part of a democracy, and we have to make absolutely sure that the vote is secure. I was a poll watcher, and I was also, I watched people counting ballots in previous elections representing the Democratic Party as their lawyer, and I'm concerned about it. We have to make sure that we're all out there, we're being diligent, and we have to work with our legislature. I applaud Rick's efforts in voting security that he's mentioned with our state legislature. And so it's certainly something that each and every one of us has to be vigilant about. We have to be focused on it, and we have to make sure that our legislators and our people that can make a difference make sure that the vote is secure.
My friends, you have some really well-informed and serious and aggressive candidates here. What you have just heard is at the very forefront, both in terms of information about what is going on as well as about what the remedies are. I stood with Rick Lass in the round room with the governor when we protested the 2004 election. It was a tragedy, and along with the fact that Dennis Kucinich represented such an exciting presidential candidate for me in 2004 that I actually began to believe politics was worth doing again. After the election was stolen in 2004 by the manipulation of the placement of voting machines, especially with respect to minority locations. I've seen the movie American Blackout with Cynthia McKinney. There's no question that minorities and college students were denied timely access to voting machines, while wealthier suburbs got as many voting machines as they need. 14-hour lines in the rain in Ohio in 2004. As a result of that, I became very active in the move to institute paper ballots in New Mexico. I worked at the legislature for most of that 30-day session. I offered several amendments trying to make it stronger. Finally, in the year after, I worked as an election reform task force voting member, and finally in the next year there was so much support, so much intense support that the governor finally embraced paper ballots. I do believe, however, though, that it is necessary for us to go to a fully hand-counted paper ballot system, and I think that would in fact make our vote much safer. Now there's one very important point here though. You will get county clerks who will go to the wall to explain to you that an optical scanner will give you a better result than a hand count every time. And these people who actually do this all the time, their information needs to be taken very seriously. On the other hand, I think that the idea of having humans do the hand count points to a more important issue and a deeper issue, which is that more Americans need to be involved in the political process. We're not actually going to get a technological solution to the problem of elections. Even if you have human beings counting, you can have corrupt human beings doing the counting. You know, there's hundreds of years, there's thousands of years of histories of corrupted elections. This points to a much deeper issue, which is the lack of civic participation on the part of the average American, and that is a much more deeper, much more fundamental issue, which we'll have to address over time.
All right, real quick. And unfortunately, we're coming to the end of our evening. I lied about going till 1 o'clock.
Well, I don't want to cut off more questions if there are some, but there's a technology called open source software that if we're not going to go to the hand count, right now, the 3 corporations that sell machines in this country won't let anyone look at their software. There's a movement started in California and New York right now that this would have to be publicly accessible information. So anyone, not me, but anyone who could read computer language could look at the software and say, oh, look, every 4th vote for a Democrat is automatically switched to a Republican. That might happen if you don't know who's programming your software. If it's available for public scrutiny, that won't happen.